When modern audiences think of ancient Indian religion, they picture quiet meditation and peaceful yoga. But prior to the 8th century BCE, the reality was built on blood, fire, and strict physical execution. This was a society governed entirely by archaic Vedic ritualism. Maintaining the universe required complex, highly expensive sacrifices that operated according to strict liturgical calendars. This photograph of a traditional Homa ritual shows the surviving mechanics of that ancient practice. In the early period, these physical rituals were the absolute center of religious life, controlled exclusively by specialized Brahmin priests. This system is called karmakanda, the ritual action section of belief. The core logic was that the exact physical pouring of ghee, the precise chanting of formulas, and the actual butchering of animals literally sustained the cosmic order. Power in the system was entirely external and transactional. If you wanted the sun to rise or the rains to fall, you had to pay the priests to feed the gods. Cosmic control belonged only to those who could afford the physical materials. To understand why that system collapsed, we have to look at the geography. This landscape shows the extensive brick ruins of the Indus Valley civilization, an urban society that died out around the mid-2nd millennium BCE. Centuries after those cities fell, Aryan culture migrated eastward, establishing a new foothold deep in the Ganges plain. For a long time, these were small pastoral communities, where the old fire rituals made perfect sense. But by the 8th century BCE, those smaller kingdoms violently merged into larger political entities. The quiet forests were replaced by a massive wave of urbanization and centralized wealth. This rapid urbanization destabilized the old social order. Kings and merchants were accumulating vast wealth and political power in the cities, which threatened the unquestioned traditional authority of the rural, ritual-focused Brahmins. Concentrated urban wealth made the decentralized, family-run rituals of the pastoral era harder to scale. The shift toward internal power was an intellectual adaptation to a society where the physical cost of the old rituals was becoming a social liability. The Veda functions as a geological record of human thought, layered over centuries into 4 distinct strata. The foundational layer consists of the Samhitas, or hymns. These texts focus heavily on cosmological origins, where the universe is created through the literal, physical dismemberment of a primeval man. Above that sit the Brahmanas. These prose texts obsessively codify the karmakanda, outlining the exact hidden meanings behind every single physical action and word used in a sacrifice. The third layer introduces the Aranyakas, or forest texts. Here, the rituals become so complex and esoteric that they are treated as dangerous secrets, practiced only in the wilderness, away from the villages. Finally, at the apex, we find the Upanishads. This top layer marks a total shift away from physical action and toward Jnana-kanda, the sections dedicated entirely to knowledge and philosophy. These Upanishads were built directly on top of the older layers. The philosophical texts represent the evolutionary climax of the fire sacrifice, rather than a rejection of it. This page from an academic analysis reveals the core intellectual mechanism that allowed this evolution. The author searched for bantu, a term derived from a verb meaning to bind. They were looking for the hidden cosmic connections that bound the ritual to the universe. Modern readers often assume the Upanishadic thinkers hated the old rituals. In reality, they were masters of the ritual. They knew the sacrifices so intimately that they figured out how to perform them entirely inside their own minds. We see this clearly in how they handled the famous Vedic horse sacrifice. This table of contents points to a specific passage in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad where the physical animal is completely reinterpreted. Instead of just butchering the horse, they created specific homologies. They mapped the head of the horse to the dawn, its eye to the sun, and its breath to the wind. The animal became a living map of the cosmos. Through this process, the word Brahmin evolved. Originally, it referred to the power of a spoken ritual formula. Over time, it abstracted into the invisible essence of the entire universe, the reality at the heart of all appearances. Once the ritual was perfectly mapped to the human mind and the cosmos, physical sacrifice became redundant. Understanding the cosmic connections became the sacrifice itself. While the Upanishads survived as anonymous anthologies, They document intense, real-world historical debates. These were public intellectual duels held in royal courts between highly famous teachers of the era. This page outlines the real-world power struggle embedded in these texts. There was a symbiotic but tense rivalry between the priestly Brahmins and the royal Kshatriyas. In several episodes, learned Brahmins are defeated by kings, who then instruct the priests on new doctrines. The sage Yajnavalkya emerges as a primary vehicle for this new philosophy. He travels to the court of King Janaka of Videha, engaging in aggressive, high-stakes theological combat to define the essence of the universe. In one of the most famous encounters, he is challenged by the female philosopher Gargi Vachaknavi. She relentlessly questions him in public, forcing him through sheer logic to define the imperishable fabric across which all of space and time is woven. Later, as Yajnavalkya prepares to leave his household, he offers his wife Maitreyi a settlement of physical wealth. She rejects it, demanding instead the one thing wealth cannot buy, the secret knowledge of immortality. These debates shifted religious authority toward philosophers. Access to the divine was no longer about who could afford the largest altar. It belonged to anyone capable of mastering the philosophy, regardless of their class or gender. All of these debates culminated in the ultimate philosophical equation of the era, the realization that Atman, the vital breath or inmost core of the human self, is exactly equivalent to Brahman, the cosmic essence of the universe. By equating the internal self with the external universe, human breath and consciousness were transformed into acts of cosmic significance. You didn't need to manipulate the gods. You were already connected to the source. This translation from the Mundaka Upanishad documents the strict requirements of this new education. It proves this knowledge of Brahman was restricted only to those who had duly performed the ascetic head vow. The consequences were immense. To achieve liberation from the cycle of rebirth, a seeker no longer needed to build an altar. Instead, they required intense mental training, strict ascetic self-denial, and the absolute renunciation of both wealth and family life. By internalizing the fire of the Vedic ritual into the human mind, the Upanishads provided the intellectual framework for the forest universities and the later rise of Buddhism and Jainism.